All right. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us in the evening. And hope you have all missed us for long. I think it's been like, what, 4 months since the last meetup. But again, thank you so much for joining us. This is a Dallas Meetup group. We still haven't done any in-person event since the COVID hit last year. So I think it's been almost like 2 years now, right? So hopefully, maybe next year we can all meet in person. That would be a good event to do. That helps in networking as well. But yeah, so as you guys know, this is more open forum as well. So please keep your questions coming in. I'll be monitoring the chat and pay attention to what Miguel is mentioning and always challenge him.
Yes, let's do.
Right. And at the end, Miguel would ask like 3 questions. So we do this trivia things for those who are coming new to this meetup, but just for you guys, like we do a trivia at the end where we ask 3 questions, and whoever answers first would get the like a training voucher, which you can use for any there's no in-person, but instructor-led training for Mule. All right. Over to you, Miguel.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. For those who know me, and it's great seeing you here. I see many known faces here or names. Hey, Al. And then, yeah, I already got the first question right. So the way I run the meetups, since we started, Roman and I, before this whole meetups initiative took over the whole world. In Dallas, we started in a very humble way with, like just 2 or 3 people and a whiteboard and just throwing stuff at the whiteboard and having debates, very lively debates, by the way, and discussions and everything. So the way I like to run the meetups, it's in a very interactive way. I know it's challenging now that we're online, but I want you to challenge my ideas because these are just ideas. Whatever you see on the meetups are just ideas that we bring to light, right? We have a certain level of experience. We have our own opinions. We have digested information in a certain way, and now we're here presenting that information. And please feel free to challenge my ideas. The good thing is, like, now I can just ignore you, right? It's harder to do in the in-person meetups. But you know what? Let's get started with this C4E. I know many of you who are familiar with MuleSoft have heard about the C4E many times. I mean, especially during MuleSoft Catalyst launch engagements. I've been working a lot with MuleSoft professional services. And so every time we introduce a customer to the platform and the MuleSoft way of doing things, we have to talk about the C4E. And, I've seen blogs, presentations about the C4E. And so one of the questions that always comes up is this one. So I want to get this one out of the way. So the C4E versus the COE. I know for those of you who might be thinking, okay, what is the C4E to begin with? Let's hold on. For those who know these questions, have seen it. It seems like since 2017, like late 2017, when MuleSoft started promoting the Center for Enablement, they started doing the comparison versus the traditional C Center of Excellence versus the new operating model, which is the C4E. Okay. Nowadays, let me tell you that this doesn't matter. Why it doesn't matter? Because doing a lot of research and on the topic and implementing the C4E many times, or helping customers implement the C4E many times, I can tell you that the COEs have evolved thanks to the adoption of DevOps best practices or DevOps practices. And you can see centers of excellence very mature centers of excellence that have adopted DevOps that operate in more efficient way than some of the C4Es that are in early stages. And so don't get confused, don't get mixed, or don't worry. Don't even worry about trying to compare C4E or COE. My suggestion is if you want to be successful at implementing the C4E, let's focus on the principles behind it, okay? So I want to make a few clarifications here. For example, let's start with what is the C4E? Well, I've seen many definitions of the C4E. I myself, I've been writing a blog. I know Roman will say that I've been writing this for like 2 years now, and it's not a lie. Actually, I've been writing it for about a year already, and I've been rewriting it like 1,000 times already. For those who know me, that's me. That's how I do it. So now I have very strong opinions. I'm sorry, you were gonna say, Roman?
Yeah, I was just perfection, so you want it perfect, so that's why you have never released it.
Well, yeah, I never released it, but I've been sharing ideas around it, right? So it evolves, right? The concepts evolves, ideas evolve. Even the C4E, the concept has evolved over time. If you start reading different articles on it, but let's focus on the core aspects of the C4E so we don't get lost. To begin with, yes, it's a cross-functional team, but don't just say cross-functional team not knowing what it means, right? When I say cross-functional teams, there is a reason behind it, and there is a meaning behind it. So there is the why. Focus on the why. Why cross-functional team? Well, first, we're trying to drive operating model change. Every time you try to drive change, I mean, you need to have the people aligned. Which people, what, who? In this case, we're trying to speed up the software the delivery pipeline, and especially when working on integration projects, especially working on MuleSoft projects. I mean, you can see even from the start who is involved in these projects. Well, like people from the business, IT managers, developers, architects, people from infrastructure, operations. Everyone has their own ideas, right, and their own knowledge. And then usually when MuleSoft comes in and we're trying to drive change, then you need to get everyone aligned and collaborating. Therefore, when we're talking about these different teams, cross-functional teams, it's very important that the team members that we bring into the C4E, they're well, first knowledgeable, and this doesn't mean that they have like 20 years of experience doing the same thing, right? Because usually in my experience, these people, they bring a lot of value. Don't get me wrong, they bring a lot of value, but sometimes it's hard for them to change their ideas, right? So therefore, the people or the team members need to be open-minded. They need to be open to see new ideas, new ways of doing things. They have to be influential, well-respected among the team members, persuasive and collaborative. Why? Because these people will influence a change, right? These people are the people who are going to be driving the change. And they have to be open to discuss new ways of doing things, right? To challenge the old way. So once we understand this, then you say, okay, what's the old way? What's the new way? And why, right? So there's so many questions there. Let's moving forward. I want to just summarize the high-level objectives of the C4E. If you follow some of the playbooks that we find in the Catalyst Lounge, one of the first steps is like clarify the objectives. And some of these are very pretty, they sound amazing, etc., etc. But first, I want to remove all that noise of, and then I want to focus on the principles behind it. Like what's C4E? What's the C4E? What's the focus? The focus of the C4E should be around Well, first, by the way, this is not in order. It can be in parallel. It doesn't matter. You just need to understand that when trying to implement a center for enablement, you want to produce reusable artifacts or reusable assets. We'll get to that. If you're thinking right now, if you never heard of the C4E, you might be thinking, okay, what reusable artifacts, what reusable assets? We'll get there. Just remember, it's all about producing reusable artifacts. Another change, we need to move to a product-based delivery, product-based project delivery. Remember that one because we're going to explain it. And the third one is reduce the friction in the software delivery. How do we reduce the friction in the software delivery? Well, we can replace the third one with DevOps. DevOps is all about reducing the friction in software delivery. I know if we start talking about DevOps or any of these points, it's a lot of information. Okay, I don't want you to get overwhelmed with a lot of information today. But I just want to remember these high-level objectives. Just remember the word DevOps. If you're not familiar with DevOps, I urge you to start watching videos on DevOps, reading articles on DevOps, books, if possible, on DevOps, so you understand the principles behind DevOps. And you can summarize that with, in DevOps, we're trying to basically reduce the friction in the process of delivering software. So let me just check the chat to make sure that no one has any questions or anyone has anything to say.
Yeah, Miguel,
Awesome.
I'm monitoring the chat. I'll interrupt you if there is anything.
Excellent. So then high-level objectives. And then, okay, we'll talk about that. So what is this operating model shift? I mean, I already say something about reusable artifacts. I say like product-based delivery. One thing that you see here is the different structures of the C4E. We talk about centralized delivery, decentralized delivery. And the last one actually is federated. Oh, decentralized DevOps or federated. So don't get confused here. When we look at these different structures, I mean, again, going back to the center of excellence versus the C4E, usually people say that, oh, okay, the center of excellence is centralized, and the center for enablement is decentralized. Not necessarily. Again, once you start adopting DevOps, you usually trend towards decentralized. It doesn't matter what you want to call it, C4E, COE, whatever. Every time you start enabling teams with self-service portals and start enabling delivery teams like with all these tools and access to platforms, et cetera, usually that enables decentralization, right? It doesn't matter. You have a centralized portal with all your operating procedures, et cetera, that makes it easier to either onboard one of your teams within the organization or hire an external team, like within a consulting firm, right, to come and help you deliver projects. And as you know, like right now, innovation is, I mean, like we have all these disruptive startups threatening well-established companies. These well-established companies is starting new projects like crazy, doing mergers, acquisitions, and everything. So right now, it's very common that companies are using the services of, in this case, MuleSoft partners to come and help them deliver these projects. So therefore, therefore, that's why it is very important to start removing all the friction in your software delivery process and moving towards more decentralized DevOps approach. However, the reality is that many companies are not ready for that. We'll talk more about that, right? Right now, let me see. Let me pause for a second to see if anyone wants to say anything on the topic, because we're going to dive a little bit deeper. No? Well, thanks everyone for joining. The ones who just joined, Yuyesh, Aniket, everyone else, Shiva. Yes, service enterprise governance. That's a good one. We'll get there. We'll get there. Actually, I mean, it's not versus the C4E. I mean, the C4E can be, you will have to mold the C4E to your organization's objectives, okay? So there is no, and this brings the topic that there is no one-size-fits-all C4E, quoting from different blogs. So basically, the implementation of the C4E is not going to look alike across different organizations, okay? Talking a little bit about this centralized versus decentralized DevOps, I will say don't worry about the structure too much right now, because, for example, let me give you one example. A smaller organization, more agile organizations, usually run in this decentralized, it's easier to run in decentralized DevOps. Why? Because they're startups. They started with all the concept of DevOps. They started with CI/CD pipelines, optimizing software delivery, automating everything. In my experience, especially now, I've been working a lot with like healthcare startups. Like, these guys get it, okay? In a way, you know. And larger organizations, sometimes they have like this very centralized IT that when you're trying to request things, even access to VPN, it takes weeks to get anything provision. And, you know, so if you focus on the structure, you will never get that. I will say every time you're running a C4E, let's focus on, try to get that mindset of anything that reduces the speed of onboarding the teams, onboarding your team members, getting access to tools. Just start checking all these things, you know. Like, go ahead, Roman.
Yeah. So is just to add to what you just said, right? Like, if I think back, I mean, I've been part of C4E and COE as well, right? So in COE, basically, you control everything, right? Like the team, COE team, is actually kind of controlling, like, if there is something to be developed, they actually take it up and then have their own team do it for them. Like, if you're building integrations in a COE, and they have more control across. But on a C4E, you are actually enabling teams to do stuff, right? To do innovations, to do integrations, everything. And the way they are enabling all the other teams is by publishing these assets and patterns or templates, everything on the exchange, which is like self-service. Like, people can go into that exchange and reuse those things, and they are not really dependent upon a team to control or to tell them like, hey, you cannot do this, our team has to do that. Is that fair, Miguel?
No.
Okay.
No,
All right.
no, but I'm glad that you mentioned this, and I'm also glad that Sridhar is saying something about centralized versus decentralized approach. That's why I want to tell you guys, do not focus on the structure, because it doesn't matter really. Focus on the approach. If you focus on the structure, you're going to start having all these issues. And I've been looking at many videos from like very well-known companies that are like software giants, and their approach to COE. And let me tell you something. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are some very well-established centers of excellence that run federated, decentralized. They're running DevOps. they're promoting reusable assets. They're promoting team enablement. All the things that you hear in the center for enablement, same thing that these guys are promoting on the COE, right?
So is
So
that before
that's
or after? Like,
it is not after. I mean, it's because what's propelling this change is not the is not the C4E, is DevOps. Because when you focus on DevOps practices, you're talking about organizational alignment, team collaboration, automation, self-service portals, all these automated deployments, CI/CD, all these practices are coming from DevOps. Okay, so let me, for example,
Yep.
so,
yeah,
so
yeah,
Miguel,
yeah. Let's let Sridhar give his opinion on this topic.
Sure.
Love it.
I hope
Hey,
I hope I'm not interrupting your flow. Sorry.
No. Go ahead. I love it.
Right. Very. First of all, thanks, Roman and Miguel, for this session. So, but on this particular slide, I want to challenge a thought. Again, it's just a discussion, right? Obviously, there's nothing right or wrong. You can obviously correct me. So, I agree on the decentralized approach very much. That's the way to go. That's just not in this Center for Enablement. That's the way that digital transformation could happen, and we could meet the gap, right? There is no other way that everyone does everything. That's not the approach. So obviously the LOBs and we have to take the delivery, while the central IT team has to enable the delivery and take care of the platform. So far so good. But the third one, which is decentralized DevOps, is what I would like to kind of the right word is not challenging, but I want to kind of discuss. See, DevOps is still one of the things which come under the best practices or the standards, right? Set, right? How delivery teams want to kind of continue the delivery. DevOps is one methodology, right, for the CI/CD. Now, one could use Jenkins, one could use GitHub, one could use different processes, right? But it is the central IT team. It is always good for central IT team to kind of standardize that process, define those platforms, define when to kind of deploy, what are the triggers, define the entire DevOps process, the pipelines. Now, the project team, so that still stays centralized from the definition of DevOps, from the standardization and all that. It is up to the project teams to utilize it and use it. But when you say decentralized DevOps, it gives a wrong notion of, hey, I'm in a LOB, North America, let's say. If I take a project A as in North America, just to simplify this, it could be sub LOBs or sub business groups as well, however we take, right, in the LOBs. So let's say the project A says, I want to use Jenkins and GitHub. Project B says, I want to use...
One second. Let me stop you right there. Sorry. Let me ask you first, what does DevOps mean to you?
I mean,
what is DevOps to you?
DevOps means to me, of course, I mean, as it is mostly the CI/CD, you want to have the automation in place. No. I'm talking from an architect point of view. I understand DevOps is basically to kind of one single team doing everything from start to end, right? Basically taking care of like a microservice approach and follow the. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, sorry. That's the thing. That's why I'm saying, like at the beginning, I don't know at which point you joined, but what I was saying, like the whole topic of DevOps, it's not about just CI/CD. It's just a set of principles that reduces friction in the software delivery, whatever that means to you, and we'll get into that point. Okay. DevOps is, everyone associates DevOps with CI/CD and tools. That is not DevOps, okay? So the DevOps builds on all the principles of agile delivery, there is a full book on DevOps. Actually, I'm seeing it right here, the DevOps Handbook. Actually, let me recommend this book. It's not a commercial or anything, but this book is really good. It's from the same guys who wrote the book on what is it called? There is another book on the Unicorn Project or something like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
I don't want to get too much into DevOps. All I'm saying is that what you're seeing here on the screen, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier, it doesn't matter. Don't focus on centralized versus decentralized versus federated approach, because every company runs differently. I'm going to give you just one example of the federated approach, okay? One example, and that's it. There is a huge company right now, huge MuleSoft customer, different line of businesses, okay? Guess what? These different line of businesses, they got their own MuleSoft licenses. Everyone runs their MuleSoft on-prem the way they want it, okay? Thankfully, well, they're using the services of MuleSoft Professional Services. So they have one team deployed to one business unit, one team deployed to another business unit, another team deployed to another business unit. So internally, the organization is not, these teams are not talking to each other. Fortunately, since we all work for MuleSoft Professional Services or are collaborating internally within MuleSoft, we started sharing knowledge. Okay, we started sharing knowledge. Hey, what version are you using? Okay, let's standardize it. Okay, hey, how about the best practices? Oh, well, I deploy my own set of best practices. How about you? I deploy my own set of best practices. Hey, you know what? Let's standardize it. So we started collecting all these things, and then we started pushing the executives to give us a central repository so we can start sharing these assets. So in this case, every business unit was paying for their own license. They were running separate. They were paying for their own delivery teams. It's completely isolated, right? Okay. So what this is not federated, you might say. Okay. What happens is that, to your point, they have like this central IT with a self-service portal where we could request access to certain tools. For example, the Anypoint Studio, we didn't download it from MuleSoft. We downloaded from this central self-service repository. It was amazing. That's federation, okay? Self-service. So basically, I will join the project and I will just make a request, and then their software delivery, automation, whatever, they will install the Anypoint Studio in my laptop, a client-provided laptop. Great. So in terms of the platform, guess what? This company, they're moving from on-prem environments to CloudHub, right? And then in CloudHub, what they did is that they started, if you look at CloudHub, it lets you create different business units. Yes, there is a central IT team that set up the whole CloudHub, Anypoint platform, and the different LOBs. But once those are set up, every team has access to their own, they control their own environments, right? So now a line of business with a team deployed to that line of business no longer depends from the central IT. They have all these self-service portals, federated. They know when to stop their MuleSoft applications. They know how to create their delivery pipelines. Of course, the standardization happened at the company level, but now everyone has access to these tools. I want access to a repo. I make a request in a self-service portal. It kicks an automation process. I get a notification. Your pipeline or whatever, your repo is created. Great. That's federation. That's efficiency. We're talking about this huge company with different line of businesses, and it sounds like in a perfect world, but it's happening. They have it. Of course, these guys have billions of dollars to throw at these automated processes, right? It doesn't happen everywhere. All I'm saying is, like, don't be close to that approach. It rarely happens. I haven't seen many companies getting there. I've only seen one. And I've seen most companies stuck at the centralized delivery. All I'm saying is that don't worry about one approach versus another. All I'm saying, if you focus on the principles, if you focus on trying to optimize your processes for onboarding, for provisioning access to repositories, to provisioning access to the platform, and you start optimizing all these things, before you know, you will start moving towards a more decentralized approach. I mean, if you're working on a huge company, I haven't seen this. It doesn't make a lot of sense for a smaller, for smaller companies that have more, like with smaller teams, right? But for huge companies, I'm talking like multi-billion-dollar companies with many lines of businesses. Trust me, this decentralized DevOps approach works. However, you made a really good point. The standardization has to happen at a central level and has to be spread company-wide. That's why in this approach, you see the C4E, the hope is that the C4E is made of representatives or people representing those different line of business, so there is some standardization. I'm all for standardization, and this is what we're trying to achieve anyway. I hope I clarify some of these thoughts. Shader, sorry, I cut you off.
Problem. Yeah. I think it all depends on your situation, your company's enterprise architecture, framework, and your definition of the business needs and the business, right? So the only thing I guess I definitely missed some of your points. I did some parallel work, by the way. So on the decentralization, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's a great discussion so far. We can move on, but on the DevOps side, as I said, it need not be decentralized. It can be centralized. And decentralization, we need to be more clear on what we mean when we say decentralized. A part of it could be shared ownership, right, between the Center for Excellence team and the project teams. So that's that. I mean, stating that decentralized DevOps, just by looking at the slide, could kind of misrepresent or misunderstand. But that's
I'd say.
But another point I want to highlight is, in general, the IT operating model in standard MuleSoft C4E, right? They say centralized, federated, which is in other words decentralized, and the third one is consumer-led, which is what basically, when the organization grows, the federated is your centralized is obviously you're doing the platform, the enablement, the delivery, everything, which is perfect. Everyone is reaching to the center of excellence. Federated is you have your LOBs doing your delivery, right? And also the let's say in terms of MuleSoft, your business group, right? The business group setup. So there is a part of enablement of taking care of the platform a bit, right? So they need to create their teams and all that. So they do a bit of platform setup, they do a bit of asset setup, and also the delivery at the same time. But then on a consumer-led, this is for a very large organization and a mature organization, you are totally separating the very common things to the Center for Excellence, the best practices, the platform and enablement for the Center for Excellence, Center for Enablement. And within the LOBs, you again have another administration, right? Another platform who doesn't take care of the delivery, but takes care of the enablement within their own LOBs. The LOBs is pretty large. For example, Amazon, the retail division is so big and huge, right? You may have multiple sub platforms and a lot of evangelization is quite different. You may have a different DDDs, right, which cannot be shared across the company, but it could be only for a particular retail industry, right? I mean, or a particular division. So you may need to kind of work on the DDDs, which is still a common in that particular group. So that's where, the delivery is only for the groups. Okay, one of the groups want to go mobile, they may use it. So that's a consumer led, based on the consumption, is what it goes. But I'm kind of pretty don't want to really drag this. We've discussed for 15 minutes on this, but want to say that I'm pretty surprised to see the decentralized DevOps. It's pretty, don't know if further challenge on it, but on some other time we could discuss more.
Yeah, absolutely.
No
problem. Yeah, let's move on this. All I'm saying is, like, again, focus on the principles. When you start focusing on the structure, we're going to spin our wheels and we'll never move forward. And I keep saying that over and over and over. That's why I hate these comparisons, because everyone has their own opinions. Trust me, I have read so much on the topic, and some big expert, author of a book, promotes decentralized, and another big expert, author of a book, promotes centralized approach. So I don't think, and that's the problem when trying to adopt a methodology. Everyone starts spinning their wheels on the things that don't really matter. Yeah. What really matters is we need to focus on the organization and then see what makes sense. And my next point is that I've seen centers for enablement that focus on centralized. So whatever makes sense and whatever makes sense for your organization and your team structure and the culture, that's where you start. So initially, you won't drive the big change. And my point I wanted to make here, and I'm glad we went into this discussion in a way, because that's where everyone starts spinning wheels. And that's why I say, don't focus on that. Where do we focus for the center of enablement? Focus on creating reusable assets. So that's the focus. That's where the focus needs to be. Not on one versus another, centralized versus decentralized, because you're going to spin wheels and you will never get to a point where you can finally start. So usually our projects move so fast. Everyone says that they want to do things right, but the reality of things is that projects are moving way too fast. So sometimes while we're spinning our wheels on the center for enablement, our project already ended, and we never started any C4E, That's usually the case. So that's why my advice to everyone is don't focus on the previous conversation and focus on what really is going to take you to the next level. What's going to take you to the next level? Start collecting these reusable assets, okay? When you start collecting these reusable assets, you really need to have a way on where to store these assets. For example, what are these assets? Documented standards and guidelines, your knowledge base, share reusable assets such as APIs. You create a new API. Hopefully, your model is reusable, right? It doesn't always happen, unfortunately, but that's the aim. So focus on the goal, right? Focus on the goal. So you start creating all these assets. The example that I told you about this huge company, everyone was deploying their own code standards for MuleSoft in different lines of business. So what happened? We started collaborating. We started sharing. We started centralizing the access to these assets. So there is some centralization happening. The centralization is needed in order to have some level of standardization. So I guess that's where the disconnect happens. So there has to be a central repository of accepted standards, accepted architecture patterns, and everything has to be aligned with the goals of the organization or the strategic goal of the organization, okay? So that about the centralization, we're talking about all these central repositories, maybe not the centralized delivery. That's what I was talking about. When you have a centralized repository where you can share all these reusable artifacts, that is what enables the decentralized delivery, because now you have a central knowledge base, a central repository of reusable artifacts that enable different lines of business deliver code faster or projects faster. That's where the difference between centralization, decentralization. You're still centralizing all these artifacts and all the artifacts, everything that has to do with the code templates, etc. So now the other aspects that I want to focus on is on reducing the friction in the software delivery. So again, whether you want to do one approach or another, as long as you start collecting these artifacts, sharing them, and then starting focus on reducing the friction in the software delivery, you're going to achieve some level of success. Don't think that you're going to implement the C4E from day one. This is an evolution, right? It's a process that is going to evolve over time, okay? And usually we do little by little. It's when you start working out, right? You don't do a full set of whatever from day one, right? You start little by little with small weight, working out like 20 minutes, and then you evolve from there. Same thing with the Center for Excellence and its implementation. The most important part is to start identifying the team members, right? Start understanding what's the goal, and then start focusing on reducing the friction in the software delivery. For example, DevOps is a huge thing. I'm telling you, there are books and books on it. You will find tons of videos, some of them challenging each other, right? We will never end if we start talking about DevOps. But if you start focusing on some of the principles, for example, the adoption of self-service portal, that will enable teams to self-serve access to, for example, I mentioned code repositories. So we know how to onboard new team members. There was a project that it took us 4 weeks to get VPN access. So it was a nightmare. We had to do this. We couldn't share code. It was a nightmare. Another project where the infrastructure team was not familiar with Maven, and they were questioning why does Maven need access to the Maven repository or the MuleSoft repository. They didn't want to open the ports, right? It caused some challenges. It took a while to get the teams enabled. So all those little things are huge and creates a big bottleneck in trying to deliver our software delivery, in trying to deliver our software fast, right? Or projects fast. So start focusing on reducing all the friction all the way from onboarding all the way to delivering the project. So this is where all this, we need capable tools and platforms. I mean, obviously, that's why a lot of companies are adopting MuleSoft, because it's faster to deliver software solutions. We focus on a lot of on streamlined processes. For example, CI/CD, okay? CI/CD is not DevOps. It's just one of the practices of DevOps. And it has to do with the concept of automate everything, right? Having repeatable automated processes. So we need to understand where things come from in order to apply them correctly. Collaboration is another aspect of DevOps. We need tools like Slack, Teams, etc. Going back to my example of this company, even though the line of business were separate and the projects were happening in isolation, having a tool like Slack allowed internal teams to communicate with each other and share best practices. Like, hey, look, I'm working on defining the best practices for the coding style. What are you using? Oh, I'm using this thing. Let me share it with you. Oh, okay. I read through it and I say, hey, look, you missed this, and that. How about this? Then we started collaborating and defining these standards, and therefore reducing the time to delivery. We started delivering everything faster and focus on other important things of enabling the customer, training, delivering more APIs, etc.
Hey, Miguel, there's a question on the chat. DP is asking, what are the other streamlined process people use other than CI/CD? Do you have any examples on that?
I mean, when I say streamlined processes, I'm talking to everything. For example, when I mentioned, for example, access to the platform, right? If I don't have access to any point platform, I mean, if there is there a self-service portal where I can submit a ticket and someone would actually take action on it with an SLA, right? I would say anything that will, I mean, that's another one, password, secret manager, access to repos. For example, there was another project where I requested access to a repository. They were using Azure, actually. They never gave access to us. We were in the project for almost 2 months. After those 2 months, we never got access to it. So we had to develop our code, send the jar or upload the jar to CloudHub. And, that's not streamlined. That made us waste a lot of time. So anything that makes you waste time, you need to improve it, automate it, and provide, if possible, self-service. So, I mean, again, this is a very broad topic. So you just think about your projects, and anything that costs you waste time, that has to be improved. Okay? Yeah, just so many. Sure. Yeah, and then, so next. So what about the product-based approach, like moving from an isolated, start from scratch delivery approach to a product-based approach? I'm sorry, this thing, maybe it's too small. So basically, usually, I mean, again, this is not all the time. These are just examples, and they're very, sometimes they're a little vague, but usually, typically, when you're in a super hurry that you're trying to build a project from scratch, usually you end up with a point-to-point solution. It has happened. Even in MuleSoft projects, sometimes we go with the best intentions, trying to tell the customer API-led connectivity, and they say, there's no time for that. Here's the system A, move the data to system B, and we started talking about reusable. It's like, no time for that. Just deliver it, right? And then we skip the principles behind it, and it doesn't matter that you're using MuleSoft. You end up with a point-to-point approach, and we cannot reuse that project. It's useless for another project. So when we start thinking about a product-based delivery, you start capturing everything from a project. Of course, it's going to take a little longer to deliver the initial project, the first project. Why? Because you have to, if you want to deliver a reusable API, of course you have to do more analysis on the domain model, right? In order to make the API reusable, you have to think about different use cases. How is this data used across the organization? It takes a little longer to deliver, but once you deliver this, once you start capturing all these architecture patterns, documentation, et cetera, it's going to take you longer. But if you capture that in a central repository that is easily accessible and discoverable, then on your next project, you can reuse all that, and then delivering your new project is going to take you less time. Again, I'm oversimplifying. It's going to change from project to project, right? Maybe your new project has nothing to do with the previous one, and all your assets are not reusable. It could happen, But I mean, again, you get the idea. The main thing here is that you get the main idea, and when you go back to your project delivery, when you go back to your organization, start thinking, okay, how can I move here? And start looking for opportunities that make sense to you, that make sense to your teams, that make sense to your organization, right? These are just the main idea. And the question is how I implement these ideas in my organization. Some of you are going to end up with a centralized approach, decentralized approach. It's whatever makes sense to your organization. These are just ideas. These are ways to do it. Just pick the one that best fits your needs and go and run with it. That's the idea. So the next thing, let me see. This is a question that a very large software giant asked me a few times. It's like, okay, can we expand the C4E initiative beyond MuleSoft integrations? I said, well, of course. I mean, the C4E is being promoted by MuleSoft because the whole platform is focused on asset reusability, et cetera, We have a exchange, right, where we can publish assets and reuse them, et cetera. But I mean, again, my answer is if you focus on the principles behind the C4E, which many are based on DevOps best practices, if you focus on those principles, yeah, I mean, you can expand those principles beyond MuleSoft integrations. In their case, I started asking questions. Hey, how about reusability? Oh, yeah, we capture frameworks. We start creating frameworks or reusable code bases, and we publish them in this repo. I said, well, that's reusability in action. Then you are already applying the C4E principles beyond MuleSoft integrations. And then start moving. You can easily expand this initiative across the organization. But anyway, that's up to you. If it makes sense for your organization, great. If it doesn't, then don't use it. So the main question is, how do we get that? And again, the first thing, I just wanted to make sure that you understand the basic principles and where people kind of drop the ball. And then MuleSoft, you can go to the Knowledgehub, MuleSoft.mulesoft.com, and you will find these playbooks that will tell you all the prescribed way to get there, all the approach, okay? But again, when you hear the approach, when you read the approach, always think about the principles that I told you, right? Sometimes they will make sense, sometimes they don't. If you focus on creating reusable assets, sharing them, making them discoverable, start changing your mindset on how you deliver projects, et cetera, it's going to be easier, right? The first step, that's another one, assess and commit. I just want to say here, when I say commit, we need commitment also from the executive team. Why? Because as you can see, we need to adopt a lot of tools. We need to let people know that your initial project is probably going to take longer so we can build all these reusable assets. If we don't have support from at the C-level, forget it. This is not going to work, period. Why? Because everyone is trying to rush, shorten deadlines, et cetera. Deadlines are applied before you even do an assessment or an estimation on the project. They just tell you, hey, you need to finish this project 3 weeks from now. Oh, you're using MuleSoft, it should take you 1 week. And you are like, okay, well, so that's why there has to be a commitment from the executive team for this to work. You need access to tools, you need budget. Oh, there's no budget for that. Well, then this is not going to work. I mean, you don't have collaboration tools. You don't even have a central code repository. It has happened. You don't have a central code repository. You don't want to invest in DevOps tools, automation, et cetera. This is not going to work, period. I don't care like how hopeful or how you want to see it or how many corners you want to take, what you want to cut. This is not going to work. But anyway, I invite you to go to the knowledgehub.mulesoft.com. For those who are working on MuleSoft projects, will have access to that. If you have at any point an enterprise account, you'll have access to that. If you're a partner, you have access to that. And look through the playbooks. Of course, each step, it's more detailed and will have a lot of information, et cetera. It will tell you like a few things on how to establish it. You have to start building and publishing your assets. A few ideas on how to evangelize the initiative across the organization. how to drive consumption. I mean, it's a lot of work. I mean, I understand it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes a lot of work, a lot of commitment, a lot of effort. It's not like here is the next workout pill. Just take it and you're going to get buff. It doesn't work that way. It takes a lot of commitment and collaboration and team effort. The last thing is another one that I want to mention this, the sixth measure. Kpi Metric Suggestion. Here is where, again, it will spark a lot of controversy and arguments here. KPIs, I would say don't even look at this list. Seriously, when you're trying to measure something, it has to make sense, okay? It has to make sense for your organization. There was one time a project that a MuleSoft partner reaches out to me and said, like, hey, give me a list of KPIs because we had to present to this customer and we had to have like the plan, the measuring, and so like what. And I started asking questions, basic questions like, how is this API being used? Well, I don't know, but we can put like like the number of API requests. And who uses this API? Well, I don't know. I said, like, well, what are you trying to measure? What is the objective? What's the business value for this API? Well, you didn't know all these answers to all these questions. So if you don't know what you're trying to measure or what's the purpose, then it doesn't make any sense that you start putting KPIs, right? So, but one idea is if the purpose was, for example, let's say you're working for an organization that has an HR platform, right? And has many projects for different customers. And you know that a central aspect of this is like APIs that provide, like employee information. And you deliver your first employee's API, right? Maybe in this case, you want to see like the adoption of this API. I just deploy this API on my public portal. I have 3,000 customers. How many of my customers are using it? Just one example. I mean, you make your own example, right? If the purpose is like you want to start creating assets, so your 3,000 customers start using them, and only one is using them, then something's wrong with your delivery there. If you say like, oh, okay, there is gradual adoption. Okay, great, this is working. Or internally, you deploy an API and new projects are using your API. Oh, okay, this is working as expected. It's working. What else? Another one. I forgot the other one. Consumption is one of them. Feedback. In exchange, you can get feedback. If the feedback of your API is positive, that's one KPI. You deliver a new API, is being used. It has great feedback. Great. That's an indication that it's working. Another thing, when we talk about products evolve. That's very, very important. So don't think that you deploy one API and initially it has like really bad feedback. You have to take that feedback and go back and improve it. So there is a cycle of improvement. There is a continuous improvement. Is very important in the C4E. So whatever you're measuring on the C4E, you have to take that feedback and improve based on that feedback. Whatever it is, whether you're talking on any aspect of the C4E, whether it's a new API that you deploy, a new process, any asset, even code standards, etc., you take feedback on those things and then improve them over time. Anyway, and more Q&As. This is all I have to say for now. I know we're probably running out of time. Best practices. Well, best practices. Best practices is, for example, best practices for API. there's a bunch of things there. The RAML, best practices for RAML implementation. For example, some of the best practices in RAML is, for example, externalize, start using traits, for example, start using traits, start using resource types. How do you structure the API? That's awesome. He got it. that is awesome. I met Higawit in Austin a couple of years ago, and she was a student, and now she became a MuleSoft software developer, and it's participating. That's awesome. Structure the API, how you develop APIs. What else? Like RAML best practices, like how do you design your resources? Reliability patterns, that's an awesome one, like enterprise integration patterns. There's so many, but I mean, those are some examples.
Hey, Miguel, we do have another question. Talks
What is
about
it?
where does the business team fits into C4E box? So that's it.
Oh yeah. I think I mentioned the business at the beginning, but let me tell you the role of the business. Okay, when we evolve, and that's another one that it will create another. You know what? We probably need a meetup to talk about the business role and how it fits in this thing. But let me tell you quickly, if you have time. I think this is all that I have to present today. But the business is super important. Let me tell you why. When we're trying to come up with these reusable models, like a very knowledgeable business analyst that actually understands how the data flows across the company, it's extremely helpful, because sometimes, I mean, you cannot say like your API is going to be reusable if you don't understand how the data flows across the business, right? So when I'm building my reusable data models, I validate them with the BA, because I tell them, oh, I'm going to create this, and they go like, oh, this data is coming. They know where the data is coming from. They know where the data goes. They know the whole flow of data. If you have a BA with that knowledge, that person is your best friend. Another way to enable the business teams is when you achieve a certain maturity on deploying your APIs and having all these reusable data models exposed as APIs. If you educate the business on where those assets are, they are going to be they're going to help you evangelizing this approach and driving this consumption of reusable assets. Why? Because when they start a new project, they call the BAs, and the BA will immediately say, hey guys, we're for this project, we need resources from, I don't know, from the accounting department, and we have APIs for that, so we can just reuse those. And they can go and look at the data, and they can say like, oh, it's missing this or that, and they can say, well, we need to enhance it. So instead of starting a project from scratch, you can just enhance an API that you already have, or you can just reuse it fully. So that's the value of the business users in this whole approach.
Good. Hey, Miguel, I know we are top of the hour. I would really want to get to the trivia.
Yeah, go ahead. Trivia.
If you don't mind, let's do that, and then we'll stay behind. And if folks have more questions, like feel free to ask. But let's respect everybody's time and start the trivia. So for those who don't know what this is, so back in those days when we used to do like in-person meetup, this would be very tough. The reason being, so the trivia is like Miguel is going to ask a question, and folks have to answer. And imagine like in-person meetup, when everybody's yelling the answer, it is very hard to find out who did first. But now it is so easy being online. So all you have to do is just type your answer, and whoever typed the first right answer is the winner. All right, everybody ready? Miguel, you ready? So folks,
Yeah.
again, just to clarify, so type your answer. Whoever types it first, the right answer is the winner. So he's going to ask 3 questions and we'll have 3 winners. And please, once the winner is announced, just DM me your email and I'll reach out to you. All right, Miguel, all yours now.
I'm gonna.
Al is already asking.
I'll read my mind. You know, like give Al a prize for reading my mind. No. Okay. That's funny. So I was gonna ask that, but just as a joke, actually. Like okay. Let's see. Okay, when we mentioned that the C4E is a cross-functional team. Okay, mention 4 different you know that. Ring. You know what? So these team members mentioned 4 business unit or divisions or teams that they belong to. Nah, that's not what I asked. So I say that it's a cross-functional teams, and it includes members from which groups in the organization. I mentioned 4 of them. Okay, I mentioned 3. Fine, Aniket. Developers, architect. No, he say DevOps. No, it's missing 1.
Well, the answers are pouring in. I can't keep up with.
Well, I'll I guess you know. Yeah, I think Al got it because he built on top of the previous one. Yeah, like Al got it. Yeah, because it's the developer, architects. Oh no, yeah, Al didn't get it. You had to type the 3 because you had to type the 3. What is it?
Technically, Divesh Patel, right?
Who? Divesh
Patel.
Ah, yeah, Divesh actually. Yeah, I got it. Developer, architect.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
Hey, DP, can you DM me your email, please? I'll reach out to you.
So,
Al, you don't need a certification. Just joking.
Yeah.
All right. So next one.
So the next one is okay. We mentioned that like some of the objectives of the DevOps is we mentioned a few things. We mentioned that. We mentioned 3 things that should be some of the main objectives of the. What is it? Reusable artifacts, product-based delivery, reduce friction. Sridhar got it. Yeah, he knew where I was going. So Sridhar, Emmanuel.
Hey, yeah. Sridhar, can you DM me your email, please?
Okay, and then I mentioned something at the end, like all this. It's great, but nothing will work unless we have what kind of support.
Yeah, you gotta repeat the question.
Yeah, you know, I say okay, this is all great, etc., etc. But in order for this whole thing to work, we need certain type of support. If we don't have that kind of support, then everything will fail. Executive level, yeah. Anthony Angulo got it.
Perfect.
Yeah, we need executive level support. I mean, remember that. I mean, if you're CTOs, these guys are not on board, you don't have money, you don't have funds, this thing is not going to work. So, or patience in delivering projects, because you know it's crazy.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Miguel, and thanks everybody for joining in. It doesn't mean that we are shutting it down now, but we can take up more questions.
I'll just stay a little bit longer. So officially, the meetup has ended. Thanks everyone for joining us. I really appreciate that you took the time, and the participation is awesome. Thank you, Sridhar. Actually, you brought like amazing points. Actually, let me confess that one of the best
Miguel, you went on mute.
go on mute. What did you hear? How long ago I went on mute?
It's been a couple of seconds, not a lot.
Couple of seconds.
Yeah.
So I was thanking Sridhar for his participation, and I say I must confess that one of the best presentations that I seen on the Center of Excellence in regards to DevOps, they were actually talking about the importance of the centralizing all the standards and best practices, etc. However, not to confuse with delivery, because they were promoting the enablement of the delivery teams, decentralized delivery teams, right? And then again, we can get to the topic of federation. But yeah, I mean, when we talk about the centralization, I'm not talking about the centralization of the delivery. We're talking about the centralization of all the standards, best practices, the IT strategy, etc., accepted architecture patterns. It's very important to centralize those things and make them discoverable, right, and accessible. But anyway, thanks so much, Sridhar.
Oh, hey, my pleasure, and thanks a lot for this session, and for Ruman and Miguel for your contribution to the Mule community. I've kind of followed your blog posts, following your meetups, many other articles. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
One last thing, I just pasted a link, a reference to another meetup for the C4E. This is really, really good. Just like how we discussed today, there, of course, multiple times this was discussed in the other meetups. I really found this very useful. So once again, this is a good recap of the concepts. Thanks again. Really appreciate it, Miguel Ruman.
Thank you. And by the way, I forgot to tell you guys, if there was a test about the C4E, listening to my presentations, you will fail big time probably. So that's
a good one.
No, seriously, because the MuleSoft has a very prescribed approach, right? That in a perfect world will work. I'm 100% with that. But the reality on the field is different. That's why I told you, like, don't focus on these standards and everything. I mean, the structure of everything. If you focus on creating the reusable assets and all that stuff, because I've been on projects where I finished the project and the C4E talks were postponed to who knows when.
Very well said, Miguel. That's very true. People ask often when we do the projects, right, the executive level, or let's say the C-level executives and the client, hey, we keep hearing from MuleSoft that there is a catalyst, there is a C4E. Are you following that approach? You know, this project that we have taken up is just a 4-month project or a 3-month project, which has a very solid functional and non-functional requirements. And not every time can we follow a catalyst approach. I mean, catalyst is something that should be there in the architect's mind to follow the approach in general. But you can't really follow every point in the catalyst and exactly use the same templates. It's impossible. For large organizations where we have a lot of setup, a lot of planning, vision, roadmap to be done, we can actually strictly follow the catalyst. But most of the times for smaller projects that we take in the service industry, it is impossible to really kind of go every detail about the catalyst. So, or the C4E, we can't really define the organization. We can't really define the central teams. We have to kind of go with the limits that we have. We define the platform. We follow the anypoint exchange. That itself becomes a C4E. And as we go on, we establish the security and the best practices. But like they say, right up, the last point I want to make is you can't start with the C4E all the time. You start with the project. You go with the delivery, but contribute to the C4E in the first delivery. And the second delivery will contribute to the C4E again. So try to differentiate and distinguish as we move on, but cannot really go with, not every company is aligned to or have the funding to start with the C4E, and after 6 months, the project won. They want the results fast to be seen. Yeah. So that's my point of view, based on my experience.
I think
You're perfectly
Divesh
right,
had
Miguel.
something to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Divesh,
yes.
what do you want to say something?
I come from a background of IBM technology and API side, like data power, and then broker message MQ and all, and then last 2 years got jump into the MuleSoft side and got certified and everything, started working on heavily on the MuleSoft side or with the RTF and CI/CD. So always we always have that higher level of, I would say, fight or discussion goes on. How do we differentiate really? System API is system API. We all know what is the intended purpose for that is, but we have found always a fight among each other, the discussion, but not a nice answer. How do you really define experience API? Process means, there is a lot of time we were told just do the pass-through experience API. Then that's what throws us out. That what is the pass-through experience API means, or so help us little bit more like your experience with different organization, because I'm giving only one organization view, right? But you have worked on different places, so help us how you differentiate that experience API, how the different organizations take it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it sort of falls into not necessarily C4E, but let me try to answer. Anyway, I mean, again, we're past we already say the meetup has officially ended, but let's just extend it and cover this topic. For those who are watching the recording, I mean, if you want to stop right here, that's fine. If you find the question very interesting, please stay, because this is probably going to take another 30 minutes. No, just kidding. So
that was a good disclosure you put it for the folks on the call.
Exactly. So, no, I mean, okay, this is very important. Again, focus on the principles. Don't focus just on the prescribed methodology. If you understand the principles behind the prescribed methodology, you will be able to make better decisions. I love to get into books and reading everything. Let me see if I find. Here it is. So, domain-driven design. I urge you to read this book. Okay. So when we talk about the system layer actually, I think it's chapter 14, if I'm not mistaken. So domain-driven design talks about all the reusable models, etc., etc. So API-led connectivity is heavily based on domain-driven design. API-led connectivity is heavily based on microservices principles. Watch out. If you try to mention the word microservice within the API-led connectivity, if you try to mention, if you say microservice, if you say that the Mule APIs are microservices, you're going to be in huge trouble with developers that develop microservices. Okay, so I don't advise that. However, we cannot ignore that the Mule APIs are pretty much based on many of the principles of microservices architectures. That is true. They might not be but anyway, where I was going with this is like all these microservices patterns and API-led connectivity, they're based on domain-driven design. So when we focus on domain-driven design, we have this concept of bounded context domain model. Okay, and if you look at chapter 14, they talk about the anti-corruption layer. What does that even mean, anti-corruption layer? Well, what it says is like sometimes the backend systems, okay, the backend systems have domain models that don't make any sense, right? Some of them are as bad as field 1, field 2, field 3, address 1, address 2, address 3, address 4. What is that? Doesn't make any sense. However, when you're working in your company, you may use those fields, address 1, to capture the home address. Address 2, you might use it to capture maybe an alternative address. Field 3, I don't know, office address, whatever address. But anyway, they're more specific. So your bounded context domain models are more specific to the domain that you're working on. Another example, I was working on an insurance company provider, right? And the backend systems, I forgot the name of the system they were using, but they were using a backend system. And there was a field that for them, that field mean something completely different. And it was confusing the heck out of the business analyst. So they told me, like, I know this field is not, we don't call it this way, we call it this other way. So we came up with a model, a data model that made sense for the organization. However, when we mapped this model to the backend system, we had to do some data mapping there, some translation. So your system layer serves a few functions. One of them, it's abstracting the backend data model, if applicable. That's one of them. I'm not saying that's the only reason you have a system layer. That's one of the reasons. One of the reasons is that your system layer is just an abstraction of your backend system. That's one of the reasons. Not so you might say, well, I love the backend system domain model. It's perfect. I don't need to change it. It fits my model. Why do I need a system API? Well, another reason why you want a system API is standardization. Maybe, just maybe, your backend system is maybe an SAP with a BAPI, right? How do you connect to it, right? I mean, I remember a long time ago, it's before I started working with MuleSoft, I wrote a Java program to connect to SAP. It was a nightmare. That was pre-Spring Framework reached a certain maturity, and it was a nightmare to write it, right? Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Thomas. So another reason is connectivity. Okay, simplify the connectivity. I mean, every modern program that you mentioned can make an API call, right? But not every. I mean, sometimes developing from scratch some system that connects to SAP and then access all these BAPIs, sometimes it's a nightmare to develop. So a system API will provide access to that system. Connectivity, right? So connectivity is one thing. Standardization of the protocol, like with REST, like REST based on HTTP. Every system can connect to it. Every programming language can connect to it. And then another one is to abstracting the backend domain model. So it can be reused, right? So, and again, when it's not an easy task, because when we're talking about designing domain models, everyone is going to come up with their own domain model. I'm going to give you one example. Long time ago, I was in New York in a MuleSoft training for developers. They were some of the best architects in the industry, and me, I was just right there crashing the party. But these other guys had a lot of experience in many different projects, and we had an exercise of a banking application. And the instructor was telling us, okay, this is how you design your resources. And someone with a lot of banking experience is like, no, that's not how you design your resources, because that's not how we use them. We use them this way. Another one who was coming from another bank, he was actually working on a project at another bank, is like, no, we use this in this context. So the resource design vary according to the company on how they use the data specifically within their processes, right? So there is a lot of going on when you start designing your system APIs and why you want to put the system APIs, how you design your resources, and everything comes back to the concepts in this book. It's not a super easy read, You had to read it a few times, and you had to have some experience to be able to connect what this book is telling you. But it's well worth it. I mean, if you are into architecture, please read it.
I think that's a good. Sorry.
Yes. Sorry, Roman, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess that book, I think that is definitely, as you says, that is, I'll keep it. But just not take too much of a time, Miguel. But in your example, when we are talking about two bank executive or two bank individuals are talking about no, this way, way A or way B, would you on that part, would you suggest to put a two different experience API? Means, because system API is going to be system API on backside, right? It is going to get all the models and everything for you. Would you, in this particular example, if would you suggest the two different experience API for two these different consumers?
That's a good one. Okay. Okay. The purpose of the experience API, there are two ways of seeing this. Okay. If you are Amazon, very few Amazons out there, right? If I'm a little tiny store, right, and I want to use the Amazon APIs, I don't go and tell Amazon to change their data models to serve my needs, right? They're gonna say no, you adapt to me, right? I'm Amazon, right? So Amazon has the luxury, or companies like Amazon have the luxury, or Google, for instance, right? They expose an API, just one public API, and you adapt your processes to consume it, right? You adapt to them. That's perfect, but the clients that we are serving, for example, in the health industry, right? Like there are these new startups, and this is across the healthcare industry. Lately, I've been working with a lot of them, small projects like 2-month projects, right? The challenge there is that they internally they have their data standardized, and since they are relatively new, because they're providing services to many healthcare providers that use many different systems. The challenge is that although they have they're following standards like HL7 or FHIR, certain standards, right? These clients, right? They don't have the teams or the capabilities or even the technology or anything to be able to adapt to the APIs that they're producing. So, and these are huge clients sometimes. So sometimes they're huge clients that brings tons of money, and because sometimes they're sending, for example, they're sending lab orders. That's one example, right? And the clients say like, hey, I can send you this lab order like this. I mean, I'm gonna send it in I don't know, HL7, right? Using the what's it called, the protocol? I forgot the protocol. The MLP, whatever. Let me see. 1 second. MLL.
So,
MLL.
if you don't mind, Miguel, like to give a short answer, Divesh, for your need, right? So, would you create experience API or not, right? So, the word experience itself defines, right? Like, do you want a different experience for two different clients in this situation? And
Yes.
when I said two different experience, we are talking about response of the API, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
if that is your need, yes, you will go ahead and create two different experience APIs. You
The thing
won't
is, like,
change.
I was gonna go there. The thing is, like, it's not even about the response. Sometimes even the protocol, because MLLP is not REST, right?
Yeah, but
So
so
you have
got
to
another
adapt.
good point from you, Miguel,
Thank
that
you
it
all.
sometimes it depends on which side you are, like, if, as you give the bigger example of Amazon, the situation might be different. But like, I have worked also with healthcare industry, and as you says, right, if you are kind of a startup, then you will try to cater multiple clients on a different ways by giving them a different experience. That's right. and then you have to do that because you are on that kind of a receiving and working with the different clients. Yep. Okay.
That's
Thank
right.
you. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, you have to adapt. And to your point, Roman, yes, I mean, sometimes it's even the structure, the data models, because it's either the data model, the protocol to be accessed, you name it. So you just have to adapt. Sometimes you just have to bend and adapt to the customer. That's why they call it a custom delivery model, because it's very custom to the type of client.
When are we, Roman, plan to do the
In person.
in person? Exactly. Yeah, because
Yeah. You all have been waiting for in person.
Those get wild.
Yeah.
Just
You know,
FYI. Just kidding.
probably next year.
because
Hopefully
regularly,
next year.
yeah, I attend Houston, and now I started attending Dallas one. So those are the two I try to attend with Jim Andrew and Mike Salami over there in Houston.
Nice.
Yeah, and we are a phrase organization for Mule, is right. I would say 1.5 year old. Started working on that. So
That's good. Yeah.
thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Miguel.
So thanks everyone. Thank you so much, Divesh.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks
Roman.
everyone. If nobody has any questions, then we can end the call in maybe like wait 10 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Again,
thank you,
Miguel,
everyone.
thank you so much for talking. I know this topic is like little, how do we say, hard to explain, but yeah, thanks a lot for taking out time and helping us out in this thing.
My
Really
pleasure as
appreciate it.
always. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.